Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and today we're going to be teaching you how to set up a Sonoff RF Bridge for use with Home Assistant, in addition to one of these PIR Motion Sensors. This is an RF Motion Sensor. On top of that, we're going to tell you how to control RF lights, such as holiday lights or LED strip lights, like the ones that I have behind my rack cabinet here. You can see I can turn them off and on and off and on. This is with the RF remote control, but instead of using this remote control, what if I want to set up some automations? What if I want to have these lights turn on and off when motion is detected by this RF motion sensor? So that's what we're going to do today. It's probably going to be a decently long video, so I'm going to have time codes down in the description below if you want to jump around. And in addition, I have written out all of these instructions that we're going to do in this video in a blog post titled Sonoff RF Bridge: How to Set Up with Home Assistant. Okay, so first and foremost, there's a lot of wireless technologies for use with Home Assistant. RF, IR, Zigbee, Z-Wave. Okay, so there's different kinds of bridges for different types of wireless technology. This is specifically an RF bridge for anything that uses RF, that has like an RF remote control. And it can be more than just lights. There's other RF devices out there as well. The version of Home Assistant that I'm using is version 2021.6.2. And all of the products used in this tutorial are listed in the blog post. That is the Sonoff RF Bridge, which is $15.99 on Amazon. The Sonoff PIR Motion Sensor, which is $17.19 on Amazon. I have some RF strip lights on the link below. They're not the exact same ones that I use, but basically if you just search Amazon for RF LED strip lights, any of those strip lights that you buy are going to work. And they come in all sorts of different lengths. Like if you wanted it to run across the entire outside of your house, you're going to need a much longer length of LED strip light than if you just want something for like behind your television. And then finally, I have a link for the Raspberry Pi 4 starter kit from CanaKit. I am running my Home Assistant off of a Raspberry Pi 4. It's a great way to get into Home Assistant very inexpensively. But if you're going to be doing more automations with a ton of IoT devices, at some point you're going to want to upgrade a Raspberry Pi to something more robust, such as a virtual machine running on like a Synology NAS or maybe like an Intel NUC server, something that's going to be more stable and reliable than the Raspberry Pi platform. But for just starting out and learning, Raspberry Pi is absolutely phenomenal. Okay, so prerequisites. We need to have the Sonoff RF Bridge. We need to have the Sonoff PIR Motion Sensor. You need to have some sort of strip light or something that can be controlled with an RF remote control. We need to have an Apple or Android smartphone. We need to have Home Assistant installed and operational. This is not a how to install Home Assistant tutorial. We already have to have that installed for this tutorial. Your Home Assistant should also have HACS, or the Home Assistant Community Store, installed and enabled. Again, installing HACS into Home Assistant is beyond the scope of this particular tutorial video, but if you search how to install HACS in Home Assistant, you're going to find a ton of videos and tutorials for other people that have already shown how to do that. And finally, within Home Assistant, you're going to want some sort of file editor. In my case, I am just using this program here called File Editor. The first thing that we want to do is install an application called eWeLink to our smartphone. And I have links for both the Apple App Store and Google Play Store versions of the eWeLink application. Again, I'm not going to show how to install that on the phone. You should be able to figure that out. Just go to the App Store or the Google Play Store, search for the app, and hit install. Once you've installed eWeLink, you then need to sign in or create a login for the eWeLink application. And remember your credentials, because those credentials, your email as well as the password that you choose, we're going to use those in Home Assistant to connect to eWeLink's cloud service in order to download the configuration information about our RF bridge and other devices. Alright, so the first thing that we need to do is adopt our RF bridge into eWeLink. So to do that, First of all, you want to be at the home screen of eWeLink. This is, after you've installed it, after you've signed in with a username and password. You're going to plug the RF bridge in to power. And then what you're going to see here momentarily is the blue LED indicator light on the Sonoff bridge is going to do 2 short blinks followed by 1 long blink. That means that it's ready to be paired. And it will only do this for 300 seconds. So if you've waited too long and it has stopped doing the 2 blinks, the sort of 2 short and 1 long blink, then just unplug it and plug it back in, or you can use a paper clip to hit the little reset hole in the back of the device. So once the Sonoff bridge is ready for pairing, open up your eWeLink application and you should be here at the home page. And all we want to do is click the plus down at the bottom, and we're going to say quick pairing, this blue box right here. So we're going to say add 1 device, and then it says please set the device into pairing mode, and it will display your wireless SSID and password, or it'll allow you to input your wireless SSID and password that you want the device to go onto. Now, keep in mind, if you have a segregated IoT network, which you should for Home Assistant, make sure you put the wireless credentials, the Wi-Fi SSID and password for your IoT network, which has to be a 2.4 gigahertz network. The Sonoff RF Bridge does not support 5 gigahertz as of the the hardware version that I'm using here. So enter in your SSID and password that you want the Sonoff Bridge to receive, then click Next, and now the device will go through, find the Sonoff Bridge since it's in pairing mode, and then connect to it. Alright, looks like it found it for mine. And now the device has been added successfully. So we're going to give it a more meaningful name than device 108BB1. And I'm just going to call mine RF Bridge 1. And then we're going to click Done. It says device is connecting to Wi-Fi. It might take a few minutes to go online. We're going to say got it. And then there we go. So that quickly, we now have the RF bridge on the dashboard of the eWeLink application. The next thing we want to do is add our remote control buttons to the RF device, the Sonoff RF Bridge. So we're going to click on the RF bridge in eWeLink, and it says there's no remote yet. Please add. So we're going to say add. We're going to choose 2 button because we want 1 button for on and 1 button for off. Then we're going to click Save, and it says 60 seconds left to press a button or trigger the sensor. And so we're going to press on. The Sonoff beeped 1 time, and I see a flashing red light along with the 60-second countdown. So we're going to press the on button, and notice that it did 2 beeps. That means that it has received the code from the remote, and if we look at our screen now, we can see that it says my remote. And then we have button 1 is blue and button 2 is still grayed out because we have not programmed the off button or button 2 yet. So now let's give this a more meaningful name. I'm going to edit this button here. We're going to call it Rack LED 1 because it's the LED that's on my server rack down here. And then for button 1, we're going to call that on. And for button 2, we're going to call that off. And we're going to save that. So now we have button 1 is on. If I turn off the light and I hit that button, it should turn it back on, which it just did. So we're going to turn, now we're going to program button 2. To program button 2, you want to long press the gray button that now says off since we just renamed it. Long press it. I get a beep from the Sonoff RF Bridge. We're going to press the off button. And then I get 2 beeps. And now we have both on and off programmed, and you should have seen the light turn off. So if I press on the app, light turns on. If I press off on the app, light turns off, right? So there we go. Just that easy. We are now controlling this RF LED strip light through the eWeLink application, which is connected to the Sonoff RF Bridge. Next, let's also add our motion sensor. So we're going to go down here to add, and this time we're going to choose alarm and hit save. And now same thing, it says 60 seconds left to press the remote button or trigger the sensor. So we're going to pick up the sensor, move it around a little bit so that it detects motion, and as soon as we did that, we got 2 beeps in the Sonoff RF bridge, and now we have our sensor as well. Now notice that every time I'm running this around and it triggers motion, come on, trigger some motion. There we go. I'm getting an alert in the app, right? Which gets super annoying. So to get rid of that alert, you can click the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner of RF Bridge and then turn off alarm notifications. And then those will stop popping up every 2 seconds or every time, motion is detected, because it gets quite annoying. And just like before, we want to give this motion detector a useful name. Right now it's called My Remote. I'm going to edit this, and we're going to call this Motion 1. And we're going to hit save. And there we go. We now have the motion detector as well as our RF on and off signals all running through this eWeLink application. Moving right along, we are now done with the eWeLink app portion of the setup. And if you've gotten this far and you're like, wow, Chris, you just made that so easy for me, I can't believe it. I'd love to buy you a beer. Well, you're in luck because there is a link, a button to buy me a beer right there. And I certainly appreciate any beers that I receive. Moving right along, the next thing that we need to do is to log into Home Assistant and install the Sonoff integration via Hacks. So we're going to come over here to Home Assistant. I've got the Home Assistant community store right here. And we are going to say Integrations. Down here at the bottom we have Explore and Add Repositories. And here is Sonoff LAN right here. I have it up because I've used it recently, but you can also just type Sonoff just like that, and you should find Sonoff LAN. Sonoff LAN was created by a guy named @AlexIT on GitHub, and huge props to AlexIT for getting this Sonoff integration put into Hacks, and man, it's just so easy to use. It's really well done integration. And looks like if you're interested in buying him a coffee, apparently he drinks coffee where I drink beer, there's a link to do that right there. Okay, so the first thing you want to see here is that this is all of the information that you could possibly ever want about what devices are compatible with this integration, how it works, configuration examples. Most of the work that I did for this documentation was based off of this right here. So read through that if you're interested in digging deeper than what we're doing in this video. But for now, we're just going to say install this repository in Hacks. And install. Now we can see that Sonoff LAN is right here and pending restart. So let's go ahead and run that restart now. To restart, we're going to come down here to Configuration. We want to scroll down to Server Controls. Let's go ahead and check our configuration, make sure that it's valid. It is. And then we're just going to click Restart and OK. Restarting Home Assistant takes about 30 seconds. Once Home Assistant has been restarted, the next thing that we need to do is tell Home Assistant the credentials for the eWeLink application so that it can go out and get all of the information that we programmed into the eWeLink app. Before we get into that, let's talk about one thing, right? So eWeLink is a cloud application, and by default, the installation that we're doing here uses what's called local and cloud mode, because that is what's recommended for most users, local and cloud mode. Which means that it does connect to the cloud to get your information, but it also is able to operate locally. Now you can also choose to do a cloud-only operation, or you can choose to do a local-only mode operation. All of the details about local-only and cloud-only are in the instructions, so go check those out if you're interested in doing one of the other modes that I'm not doing in this video. But for this video, we're going to take the standard mode of local and cloud, or local and cloud mode. So the first thing we need to do is copy this code here into our configuration.yaml file. So in Home Assistant, I have this file editor, and I'm going to open up configuration.yaml. In the documentation, you can basically copy and paste this stuff right here, or so here's the thing, YAML, right? The YAML file format is very finicky about spacing and tabs and stuff like that. So what I have in here is the exact correct spacing, But sometimes through the web, things don't get formatted properly. So you can also refer to the installation instructions for the Sonoff Lab integration, or I have also created for you a GitHub repository that has all of these examples included. So if you click on configuration.yaml, here is the part 1 configuration. This is what we're doing right now. So you can just copy and paste this out of GitHub instead, and it should be perfectly formatted via GitHub. Don't worry about the stuff down at the bottom yet. We're going to get to that a little bit later in the application, or in the tutorial here. So I'm going to copy all of this stuff, Sonoff, your email, your eWeLink password, and we're going to go back to Home Assistant, and we're going to paste that in right there. And then for username and password, you're going to put your eWeLink credentials, which is your email that you use to sign up, and then the password that you use to sign up. Once you have your credentials input, go ahead and click Save. And then we're going to restart Home Assistant again. So Configuration, Server Controls. Let's check our configuration. It says configuration valid, which means our YAML formatted properly. And then we're going to click Restart. And OK. Once Home Assistant has been restarted, we can now make sure that it can see our Sonoff RF Bridge. Go to Configuration and Entities. And then if you click up here in the search box and just type Sonoff, there we go. So we have our Sonoff RF Bridge, and the entity ID is remote.sonoff_ and then, the MAC address of the bridge. Make sure you take note of this entity ID because we're going to be using it in some of the scripts and automations that we're going to be creating next. Let's create our first automation using the Sonoff RF Bridge. And here is the code. Once again, this is also in the GitHub repository, but this is the code that we're going to use. So the first thing that we're going to do here is basically just set up an event or a notification event, meaning that anytime the Sonoff RF Bridge detects any RF signal, so motion detected from the motion sensor, or if I manually trigger the light on and off with the remote control, every time I do that, this Sonoff Bridge is picking up that information. So what we want to do is create an automation to say, anytime you pick up some information, let's pop a notification about that information so that we can see exactly what information you're receiving, Mr. Sonoff RF Bridge. So that's what we're doing here. So we're going to create a new automation. Automations have triggers, conditions, and actions. In this case, we don't have any conditions. We're just doing a trigger and an action. The trigger is an event from the Sonoff remote service, I guess, if you will. The action that we're doing is creating a notification, and we're going to call it Sonoff RF Receive, and then it's going to have this message body, which is going to tell us the name of the device that triggered, as well as the command that was used and the date and time stamp. So copy all of this stuff in here, or copy it out of the GitHub repository, and then open up your file editor. You want to scroll down to the bottom and paste in that code. Now, the ID here, this 14-digit ID, is basically so that we can turn this automation on and off and edit it within, configuration automations in Home Assistant. If you don't have that ID, it'll show up under configuration automations, but you won't actually be able to control it unless you have this unique ID. So it's just a unique 14-digit number. You can use the number that I have in my example as long as you don't have another automation that uses that exact same 14-digit number. So we're going to say save, and now let's go to configuration, server controls. Now this time we don't need to do a full server restart. Let's just restart our automations. So we're going to restart those automations, and then what I can do here is start moving around like my motion sensor, for example, and then boom, as soon as I move around my motion sensor, notice that we got a notification over here. Now we're at 2 notifications because the motion sensor is still going, over here in the bottom left-hand corner. So if I click on notifications, here's our automation in action, right? So we see Sonoff RF Receive. The name of the device was Motion 1. That's what we called it in the eWeLink application. And then this is Command 2. And the reason that it's Command 2 is because the various commands from eWeLink that are associated with a particular RF bridge go in order starting from 0. So Command 0 was the on button for my remote control. Command 1 was the off button for the remote control. Command 2 is the wireless PIR motion sensor, the RF motion sensor. So you can see that events just keep going and going and going, so I'm going to put this motion sensor off to the side and not pointing at me so that it's not triggering any more events. But if, for instance, I wanted to see the command for the on button, I can just click on, and then there you go. So what the command that we received, the name was on, and it was command 0. If I do off, there's a notification, name off, command 1. So now we kind of know the command codes, if you will, for each of the 3 different things that we're dealing with. And if you ever want to know what command something is, just turn this notification automation back on. For now, though, since this is super annoying to have notifications happening every time I'm touching a button or triggering motion, we're going to disable it. So we're going to go to Configuration, Automations, and then right here, this is the Sonoff RF Receive. That's what we called it. We're just going to turn that off. Over in Notifications, we can just scroll to the bottom and click Dismiss All. And if you ever want to see them again, just turn that Sonoff RF Receive automation back on. You know, do some motion sensing, hit some buttons, and you'll get all of those same alerts back. Okay, so that's great. We can now see that we are receiving input signals to the Sonoff RF Bridge, but you know, what next? Well, next, let's go ahead and create some buttons that we can use in a dashboard to turn these lights on and off. And again, here is the YAML file. I'm going to grab it from GitHub. So we're going to grab all of this information here and copy it. And then you want to edit in your file editor config/scripts.yaml. Okay, so here we go, and I'm just going to paste these at the bottom. Now, there are a couple of things that you're going to want to do differently. So first of all, the alias is just the friendly name for this button or this script. Remote send command, just leave that alone, don't touch that. But the entity ID, remember I talked about the entity ID earlier that you should have taken note of? That's the entity ID that you want to put in here. It's probably going to be remote.sonoff_ and then some other, you know, MAC address besides, you know, because it's not going to be, mine is unique to mine. Yours is going to be different. So just make sure you have that entity ID. And then where I have command 3 here, this is from some other testing. I'll actually fix this in GitHub before I release this video. But we want to do, the button 1 is going to be turn on the light. So that's actually command 0, right? Press that, boom, command 0. So we're going to say command 0 to turn on. And then for the icon, I just made it a light bulb. You can change the icon to whatever you want. Same thing for button 2, except in my case, it's command 1, which is the off button of the remote control. And same light bulb and all that. So we're going to save this script, and then we need to go reload the scripts in configuration. So configuration, server controls, scroll down here where we see scripts and click that button right there to reload our scripts. Once the scripts have reloaded, we now should be able to go to configuration scripts, and there we go. We've got send RF button 1. Now watch, if I click it, boom. So through Home Assistant, I am now able to control that light via RF, via an RF signal. Send RF button 2 turns it off. Boom, lights off. Look at that. On, off with the click of a mouse. Absolutely love it. But that's not so useful, right? We want to actually add this to a dashboard. So let's do that next. We're going to go to my Office dashboard, since that's where I control all of this stuff in my office. And we're going to say Edit Dashboard. And we're going to add card. And we want to scroll all the way down here to horizontal stack. Since you have to use different commands to turn it on versus turn it off, we're just going to do 2 buttons side by side. The first one is going to be the on button. The second one's going to be the off button. Now, in Home Assistant, there's 1,000 different ways to do the same thing. So you might have a different or better way to do it. If you do, make sure you post that down in the comments below this video or post it on the blog post at crosstalksolutions.com. Okay, so our horizontal stack card, we're going to first choose a button. The entity that we're going to use for our button is going to be the name of the button that we created, or the name of the script, which was send RF button 1. So that's our script. And notice it already pulls the light bulb from that. And then we can give it a friendly name, because we might not remember what send RF button 1 means. So we're going to say rack LEDs on. And then now, that's our first button. We want to add a second button too for off. So we're going to say button For the entity, we're going to say send RF button 2, and we'll call this rack LEDs off. And then we're going to save that. And now we have buttons on our dashboard. So I can turn on and turn off, just like that. Boom, on, boom, off. So I'm seeing them go on and off as I'm clicking them on the dashboard. So go ahead and click X to save that dashboard, and there we go. We're all set with buttons to turn these lights on and off on a Lovelace dashboard. Pretty cool. Now it's time to tie everything together, right? So we have the lights controllable by Home Assistant. Now let's make sure that the lights turn on when motion is detected by this motion sensor. And again, this is just an example. You could use this motion sensor to turn on some hue lights, or to turn on a fan, or to do whatever. Anything else that you can control, you can use this for. I'm just using this PIR motion sensor with this particular set of LED strip lights because everything's RF, right? And it makes for a good example for this video. But the sky's the limit, right? Use your imagination to figure out how you can best integrate this type of RF motion sensor or any type of motion sensor into Home Assistant. Since we have this motion sensor, we need to define the class of motion sensor in Home Assistant, right? So basically what we're going to do next is we're going to append what we already added. So we already added our username and password to the configuration.yaml file. Now we're going to append some additional information that says RF bridge, then the name of our RF bridge, whatever we named it in eWeLink. And then we're going to say this is a motion sensor. We're giving it device class motion. And we're telling it timeout is 60 seconds. So the timeout is important, right? Because it has to do with the timing of how lights or whatever is going to turn on and off based on your motion detector. When motion is detected, right? So I run motion in front of this device. It goes from a state of off to on, right? So basically motion has been detected. And when it turns to on, there's a 60-second timeout because I'm setting 60 seconds here. So as soon as that motion is detected, it starts the clock, the countdown from 60 seconds. Now, if motion is detected again within those 60 seconds, it's going to reset that timer and start counting down from 60 seconds one more time. And it'll keep doing that over and over and over again until it doesn't sense motion for 60 full seconds. Then it goes back to state off. Okay, so that's sort of the mechanics of how this, this motion sensor works within Home Assistant. So we're going to go to our configuration.yaml. We're going to grab the bottom portion of this right here. We're going to copy that, and we're going to paste it into configuration.yaml. Remember to name it the exact name that you used in eWeLink, including if you did like motion space 1, you want to have a space in there, right? If you called it blah, 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 you want to actually name it blah, blah, blah in this file. Okay, so save that. And now we need to reload Home Assistant yet again. Check configuration, everything looks good. Let's go ahead and restart Home Assistant. Now that Home Assistant has been reloaded, we want to put some more automations into our automations.yaml file. And here's what we're doing. So here's our unique ID for these other automations. We're giving it a friendly name and description. And then again, automations have trigger, conditions, and actions. We're not using conditions for this tutorial, so we're just doing what's the trigger, and when the trigger is triggered, what actions are we doing, right? So in this case, the first automation is the trigger is a binary sensor state change. So we're basically saying for our binary sensor called motion 1, again, the name of that sensor in eWeLink, when the state changes from off to on, that is the trigger. Okay, so basically we're saying when motion is detected, that's the trigger. The action that we're doing is we're doing remote send command to this entity, that's the remote.sonoff _, and then you're going to put your own information for the entity, and we're going to send it command 0. And what was command 0 again? The on button of our light, right? On is command 0. Our second automation is very similar, so ID, friendly name and description. The trigger this time is when binary sensor motion 1, this is actually motion 1 without the space in there, without the underscore, so pardon the sloppiness of my stuff here. I will fix that in the GitHub repository. When motion sensor 1 state changes to off for 30 seconds, that is when we are going to trigger command 2, which actually should be command 1, which is the off button. Again, I will fix this before I release this video. But essentially what we're saying there is this motion sensor has its own 60-second timeout. So when motion is triggered, it gets turned to on, and this is timed out after it has not detected motion again for 60 seconds. Once it has not detected motion again for 60 seconds, the motion sensor state turns to off. So what we're saying here is after 60 seconds of no motion, when the motion sensor state turns to off, wait an additional 30 seconds and then send the command to turn off our light. Okay, so in a perfect world, right, if we have this motion detector hanging in our garage or something and you walk into the garage, it detects motion, turns on the light, and then you walk out of the garage, it's going to be 90 seconds, 60-second timeout in the motion sensor, and then an additional 30 seconds after the motion sensor is timed out for 90 seconds total. 90 seconds, and then that light will turn off. Again, adjust those times as you see fit. I'm just using 60-second timeout and 30 seconds to turn off the light after it's not detected motion as arbitrary numbers, right? Just use whatever timing works best for your own automations. So let's copy all of this from GitHub, and then in Home Assistant, we're going to go to our file editor and edit automations.yaml. And down at the bottom of that file, we're going to paste all of this new stuff here. And it looks like I actually have everything set right in GitHub, so it's actually only wrong on the blog post. And again, I will fix that before this is released. So we're going to save that. Configuration, server controls, reset our automations or reload our automations YAML file. And now if we go to configuration automations, we should have a couple of new automations. RF LEDs off after 30 seconds and RF LEDs on with motion. So what I can do is just test them without the motion sensor, just make sure the actions are working properly. So if I click run actions for LEDs on, LEDs came on. If we do run actions for LEDs turn off, LEDs turn off. So we know that the actions are working properly. Is the motion sensor working properly? Well, let's test that now. Let's grab the motion sensor. I'm going to move it around, and boom, the light came on. Now, I'm not going to sit around and make you guys watch for 90 seconds to make sure that the light turns off, but I can almost guarantee that that's going to work perfectly because this is the third time that I've set this up, and I have kind of ironed out all of the kinks, if you will. All right, so there you have it. That's actually pretty easy. That's a lot of stuff to take in, but again, learning the YAML files and just looking at the different things that these automations and scripts are doing goes a long, long way towards understanding Home Assistant and understanding how all of these different devices and entities and automations and scripts all sort of fit together and coalesce to a point where you can really start to dial in some super cool automations for your home. Okay, if you enjoyed this, make sure you click that link to buy me a beer, and I will absolutely take advantage of any beers that you guys buy me. Also, make sure you subscribe to Crosstalk Solutions if you have not done so already. We are producing about 2 to 3 videos a week on cool topics such as Home Assistant, computer networking, voice over IP phone systems, and other awesome tech. All right, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, and we will see you in the next one.